Hi, this is Jerry. I've got a question for you. What are you going to leave behind? Now, there's a lot of things that we can leave behind when our life is over. We can leave behind money. We can leave behind a house. We can leave behind possessions. But Proverbs reminds us that one of the greatest things that we can leave behind is a family that remembers how we live. Welcome to Proverbs 17:6. What a beautiful picture of a family. But what does King Solomon mean? He was talking about generations. He looked in one direction and he sees grandparents looking at their grandchildren. Then he looks in the other direction and he sees children looking up to their parents. There's something very important about connecting them. It's called legacy. The Hebrew word for crown is at-ara. And the word crown means an honor or something of great value. King Solomon says that children or grandchildren can become a beautiful crown of a long life. But notice the second half of this story, this proverb, the glory of children are their fathers. The Hebrew word for glory is tiferet. It carries the idea of a beauty, honor, distinction, something worthy to be admired. Now, this verse isn't really about age. It's about what one generation gives to the next. Imagine an older man sitting at a family gathering. The grandchildren are running around and laughing and playing. One little boy climbs into Grandpa's lap, and the grandfather looks around the room and he realizes something. Years ago, he was the young father trying to make a living. He worried about paying bills. He wondered whether he was raising his children correctly. He made mistakes. He had victories, and he even had disappointments. And now, decades later, he's holding the next generation on his lap. Suddenly, he understands something. His greatest accomplishment wasn't what he owned. It was what he passed on. His faith, his character, his honesty, his kindness, his wisdom. Those are the things grandchildren can carry long after Grandpa is gone. So what are we passing down? Every generation teaches the next generation something. The question is, what are we teaching them? Children and grandchildren watch more than they listen. They notice how we treat our husbands or our wives. They notice whether we keep our word. They notice how we treat people who cannot do anything for us. They notice whether our faith is something we merely talk about or something we actually live. You may forget something you told your grandchild 20 years ago, but that grandchild may remember it for the rest of their life. This is the power of legacy. An old proverb says, a good name is a second inheritance. You can leave some money and eventually it may disappear. You can leave property and someday it'll be sold. But leave them wisdom, character, faith, and a good name, and you have given them something that can last for generations. Now, there's benefits for following this proverb. When families honor one another, something beautiful happens. Children gain roots. Parents gain purpose. Grandparents gain the opportunity to pass along wisdom that took an entire lifetime to learn. And younger generations don't have to begin life from zero. They can stand on the shoulders of those who came before them. Now, of course, there's dangers of not listening to this proverb. There is another side. A family name can carry pain instead of honor. Anger can be passed down. Bitterness can be passed down. Dishonesty can be passed down. Broken relationships, broken marriages from one generation to the other can be passed down. Someone eventually has to say, it needs to stop with me. We cannot change yesterday, but we can decide what we will hand down for tomorrow. Now, there was a grandfather once told his grandson, when I was your age, I walked 5 miles to school every day. And the grandson said, well, why didn't your parents just drive you? And Grandpa answered, because they were still telling me how they walked 10 miles a day to get to school. Apparently, every generation adds a couple miles to that story. But underneath those family stories is something important. What we're passing something along. Let's make sure it's worth receiving. Now let me leave you with this closing thought. So I want you to ask yourself, what are you going to leave? Not what will be in your bank account, not what will be sitting in your garage, nor what will be written on a list of possessions that you have. What will be living in the hearts of the people who you knew? You see, King Solomon tells us that grandchildren can be the crown of the older generation, and children can find honor in those things that came before them. So live today in such a way that someday your family can say, I'm thankful for what they taught me. Have a great day.